To be living in the early 21st century is in many ways a blessing. Huge varieties of amazing food, endless amounts of immersive games, relatively low risk of physical war, etc., etc. It's simply a matter of fact that the average poor person of today has a better quality of life than even a medieval king did back in the day. However, to be alive now is also, in many ways, a tragedy. As the old saying goes, we were born too late to discover the seas, but born too early to discover the stars. After man first landed on the moon in 1969, many expected, perhaps rather optimistically, that by the year 2000 we'd have a colony on Mars. Alas, here we are, decades after the long-anticipated millennium, and not only are we nowhere near close to becoming a spacefaring species, but actively devolving in the process. What should have been the century of mankind spreading out from its genesis into the wider depth of the galactic unknown has instead degenerated into a war of culture between those controlled by a perverted corporate elite and those who dare to resist them. Yet despite it becoming increasingly evident that space travel is not meant for our generations, for many, the dream has yet to die. As a coping mechanism for our lack of cosmic innovation, we instead find ourselves creating fictional universes to simulate what it may eventually be like for the humans of the future to finally leave our planet and explore once again. One of these simulations is Mass Effect. Mass Effect is a game that I've heard endlessly about throughout the years, just lurking in the background waiting for me to play it, and yet despite recommendation after recommendation, I've never really bothered. Until now. That's right, a game that came out all the way back in 2007, the greatest year of all time, being played for the first time today by me in the 2020s. A third-person space shooter RPG. I'm going back to experience this ancient game more than a decade and a half after its release, to see just what exactly the fuss is all about, and most importantly of all, of course, to see if you too should do the same. That is, of course, assuming you haven't already, as frankly, I think I'm the last person on Earth who hasn't played this yet. So the first question you're probably asking is, what is Mass Effect actually about? Well, before we can answer that, we must create our character, which is the very first thing the game asks you to do. Now, I've dealt with many character creators in my time, but I have to say, this one is honestly quite a disappointment, at least in the cosmetics department. It has a very limited amount of customizability, even for its time. For example, The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, a game that came out a year before this one, had a character creator that felt much more advanced. There's bugger all hairstyles, facial enhancements, or any of that jazz. And for a game set in the third person whereby you see your character constantly both in gameplay and cutscenes, that's honestly quite disappointing. I tried to make myself, but needless to say, this does not look like me. What I won't criticise, however, is the amount of narrative and gameplay customization. And starting with narrative, you get to select what's called your psychological profile, which is basically your backstory, such as where you're from, as well as a myriad of other elements that make up who you are, that other characters will actually pick up and comment on in the game. It's kind of like the life path system from Cyberpunk 2077, except here, it actually does something. For example, I said that my backstory was that I was from Earth, and I put my life on the line to save my squad. And within the first few minutes of the game, people would not stop bringing it up.
He proved himself during the Blitz. Held off enemy forces on the ground until reinforcements arrived.
You're a war hero, right? Held off an entire enemy fleet during the Blitz single-handed?
You held off an enemy assault during the Blitz single-handed.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's cool when a game recognises your decisions, but simmer it down a bit, you're making it too obvious. And as for gameplay customization, you can of course select your preferred difficulty, so of course I picked Veteran, which by the way I also recommend for you to pick if you have any third-person shooter experience at all, as it was most easy. But quite an oddity for a single-player game, however, is that you can select your own character's class, which, to be completely honest, I just stuck with a default soldier class as everything else just seemed way too vague and overly complex in comparison, but hey, choice is very rarely a bad thing. Alright, so after making your character, you slowly get briefed into what the game is actually about. You are a crew member on the Normandy, a human-operated spaceship, and your job is to travel around the galaxy and prevent trouble where you find it. And this really, out of everything, is the main selling point of Mass Effect: the story. Being a space game, Mass Effect is of course set over 100 years in the future, whereby humanity has spread out from Earth and has started colonizing the cosmos. However, we are not alone. Turns out the galaxy is filled with other highly intelligent life forms just like us. Some of these life forms are, well, not the most polite of creatures, to say the least, whereas others are actually our friends and allies. Some species are aggressive, some are quite passive, others are very religious, whereas others are pragmatic. Either way, there's a lot of them, and they're all quite unique with rich, deep lore accompanying them. Kind of reminds me of the Warcraft universe in that way, if you know what I mean. Speaking of Warcraft, this does feel like the sort of universe you could make an MMO out of, truth be told. The three most powerful species in the galaxy make up what is known as the Council, whose purpose is to essentially rule over much of the cosmos. You have the Asani, the Solarians, and the Turians. The Asani are these blue ladies who have a reputation for being very diplomatic and can live up to 1,000 years. And yes, there are only ladies. According to their wiki page, they are able to reproduce with a partner of any gender or species. But whatever the hell you do, don't look these up on your search engine of choice. Seriously.
I also have one more thing to give you, if you're interested.
Ooh. I'd be honored.
I offer a gift of words, an affirmation of who you are and who you will become.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
You know what they say? Blue ladies, blue balls. The Solarians are these, well, I mean, I don't know how the hell you describe them, to be honest, but yeah, they have a reputation for being very quick of mind. Sadly, however, they only tend to live for around 40 years. I mean, damn, 1,000 years versus 40 years. What a rip-off. And the Turians are known for being quite militaristic and warlike, but ultimately able to compromise for a greater purpose if it will benefit them. They're also a massive pain in the ass and tend not to get along well with us humans at all. And speaking of humans, something you may have noticed is that we're not a part of the Council, and the reason for that is we have yet to be deemed worthy enough to do so. That's right, whereby in most games we humans are typically portrayed as being the main species of sorts. Something cool about Mass Effect is that in this game, humans aren't the centre of the universe as we typically believe we are. It breaks this trope and actually knocks us down a peg.
I have no time to entertain refugees from that urban blight called Earth.
Indeed, in this game, humanity is the bitch, which, let's face it, is exactly how it would be in reality. And you know, this reminds me of that old story from like the 1970s. You ever heard of that? The one with the plaque? Oh, let me tell you about this. In the 1970s, NASA sent a golden plaque up into space called the Pioneer Plaque that showcased a sketch of what human beings look like, as well as our location in the universe, hoping that aliens would one day eventually find it and come and visit us. And I've always thought this is one of the dumbest things humanity has ever done. I mean, clearly, these guys have not played Half-Life 2. Imagine being such a barbarically underdeveloped and tribal species as ours, who can't even get to another planet without pissing our pants, and seriously believing that a spacefaring extraterrestrial civilization would seriously treat us as equals. I mean, are you having a laugh? Have you seen the state of the Western world today? If they came here, they wouldn't want to befriend us, they'd want nothing to do with us. I mean, imagine if we humans discovered an Earth-like planet inhabited by monkeys, let's say. I mean, what would we do? We'd either 1. Drain the planet of all its resources, 2. Kill off the monkeys and move in ourselves, or 3. Watch silently and observe. What we wouldn't do is help the monkeys out. That much I am certain. Someone would probably try and screw them. By sending out a golden plaque into space with our address on it, we're basically asking to go extinct. I mean, we should be beyond grateful we haven't been wiped out yet. Well, actually, at this point, I'm not sure about that one.
You wanted proof? There it is.
But anyway, back to the story. So humanity wants to join the Council, which is exactly where you come in. You must prove to the Council that humanity is worthy of such an ascension. But how exactly you try to do that, I shall leave for you to find out for yourself. As I said, the greatest part of Mass Effect is its narrative. You never know what's going to happen next, and just when you think you've figured it out, the game pulls a fast one on you and mixes it up further, resulting in a very engaging and memorable experience that any RPG fan would very much enjoy. There's a lot of extensive dialogue and multiple choice options that actually affect the narrative. The game even features a codex whereby you can read and listen to expanded lore tidbits that would perhaps be too over the top for more gameplay-minded individuals, but can still be consumed by us lore nerds here optionally. You can just tell a lot of passion was behind the writing team of this game. Unlike other games... Now, being a space game, Mass Effect of course takes place in space, meaning you aren't just confined to one planet. On the contrary, you have the entire map of the Milky Way galaxy available at your disposal, that you can use to travel to numerous different worlds at a whim. And when I put it that way, it sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? As you may expect, it doesn't really work that way in practice, and is really just an illusion. There's a handful of main planets where the story takes place that, frankly, are all very small and restrictive. Apart from one city, you never really get to see where all these alien species actually live or how their civilizations operate. Everywhere you go is just kind of a war zone. Granted, I will say, the environments are all quite different, with some places being snowy, volcanic, or even tropical. But it doesn't really matter when you can't really explore much of them. Mass Effect is not open world in the way that, say, Fallout is, for example. It's very much like Deus Ex, whereby, yes, you can technically go where you want, but the world, or worlds, are very closed off and choreographed. Alongside the main planets, you also have these survey planets, whereby you can drive around in this car thing, which, Jesus Christ, is an absolute pain in the arse to control. Besides the terrible controls, however, the first time you go to one of these planets, it feels mind-blowing, like, wow, this is like the Mars Curiosity rover or something like that. But eventually, you realise that, this is actually just pretty lame, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm driving around on a minuscule map that's filled with mostly mountains and sand, searching for... what exactly? Oh yeah, ore. Yeah, there are numerous collectibles hidden around that you can find. Wow. I mean, sure, there are some side quests or assignments that can happen here too, but still, these really could have been better. Granted, however, we must remind ourselves that this is a game from 2007, so though the quality or quantity of the worlds aren't that impressive by today's standards, back then, the illusion of depth that this game provides must have been groundbreaking. Speaking of a game from 2007, damn, Mass Effect looks good for its time. Don't know about you, but if I had no idea when this game came out and was forced to guess, I'd say around at least 2012 or so. It doesn't look like a 2007 game at all. No, it looks way too realistic for that. Not bad, Bioware. Not bad at all. In 2021, this game, alongside the second and third, were remastered in the so-called Legendary Edition. I don't know why I said it like that. Remastered, excuse me. Let me try that again. In 2021, this game, alongside the second and third, were remastered in the so-called Legendary Edition, which I was thinking of getting, however I never actually did, because when comparing how the original looked to the remaster, I barely noticed much of a difference. At least not enough to warrant making a full price purchase, when I can just play the original on Game Pass instead. Which means that all of the gameplay you see here is actually the technical worst looking version, which to me is very impressive. But there's one thing about this game that I will never understand. By default, the game has this weird film grain filter effect, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to notice it watching these recordings back, but if you look very carefully, you'll see what I mean. And I'm just like, why? In what universe does having a film grain effect permanently on make the game look better? I mean, did they think it looks more cinematic or something like that? I have no idea, but my word, be sure to go into the options so you can turn this off ASAP. Unfortunately, I can't be as forgiving when it comes to the gameplay, which, though isn't bad by any means, it's not exactly good either. It's a third-person shooter. You aim, you shoot, they die, or you do. And it really is as simple as it looks. And if you've ever played a game like this before, then you already know what to expect. Well, except perhaps how ammo works. That was quite a surprise. As in, there is no ammo. Instead, you fire your weapons as much as you want. But if you fire them for too long, they will overheat and become unavailable to use for a few seconds, meaning that you have to time your shots well. Honestly, though annoying at the start, I think this is actually a pretty good system, as normal ammo works in practice in almost the same way anyway, and this just allows you to be a bit more creative with your shots without having to worry about how much ammo you've got, which I think is a good thing. But even if your weapon does overheat, you should still be fine, as very rarely are you on your lonesome. During missions, you can choose to be paired with 2 members of your squad, who will travel around with you and assist you. You can order them around to help you in battle, or just talk to them for some company. Travelling the cosmos can certainly be a lonely experience, so having some pals around is most appreciated. I haven't yet spoke about my biggest complaint with the game, and that is the UI.
This may be problematic.
Cosmetically, the game's UI looks fantastic. The light and dark blues kind of remind me of Halo Combat Evolved in a way, which this game was clearly inspired by. I mean, I adore such mid-2000s cosmetics like no one's business, so no, my problem isn't how the UI looks. My problem is the UI itself. It is an absolute pain in the ass to navigate in almost every way, shape and form. Let's start off first of all with the minimap. This minimap has to be quite possibly the most useless UI element ever crafted by a human being. It is genuinely just a blue circle which 99.99% of the time contains absolutely zero useful information of any kind. No walls, no directions, absolutely bugger all, except showing you occasionally where some enemies are. Which is pretty bloody useless most of the time, as it's quite hard not to notice a giant alien dude charging at you, firing bullets like it's a sport. Come to think of it, is this even a minimap or just a radar? Genuine question, because I can't tell. Either way, if it is a minimap, it's an absolutely useless one. But if it is just a radar, why? Why not make it a minimap too? It would save me from having to open up the map constantly. And the map, oh, that's another problem. You see, in order to open up the map, you have to press start, then select map, every single time. And that might not seem like a big deal, but when you find yourself checking it all the time, it quickly becomes a real chore. So you'd think then that, I don't know, there must be some way to shortcut opening it. Not that I could find. The select button does absolutely nothing, literally nothing at all. So why didn't they just put it there? No idea.
Keep it simple, understood?
And this is just one of many examples of the UI being an absolute chore to use. In order to swap a weapon, you have to hold down the bumper, which then unleashes this horrific monstrosity of a triple weapon wheel. Same with these abilities that you unlock by leveling up. Yeah, you have to activate them via a menu, both of which, I might add, pause the game. I mean, why they don't just use the D-pad for such shortcuts, I don't know, considering games like Fable 1 figured this out years ago, but I digress. Then we have other annoyances, like if you decide to skip someone's dialogue, it sometimes accidentally picks your next dialogue option by mistake, and yeah, that's a nuisance that happened way more than once.
Report complete. Do you have an additional?
That's all I need right now.
Very well, Commander. Logging you out. User alert. Main react. Online.
That's all I need right now.
Very well, Commander. Logging you out. User. Online. How may I assist you?
That's all I need right now.
Very well, Commander. Logging you out. You. Online. How may I assist you?
Or perhaps how managing your equipment is like trying to go through an Excel spreadsheet with just how much crap there is to deal with. Or perhaps how pressing the A button to sprint does bugger all but zoom in the camera for no reason whatsoever when you're not in combat. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I mean, look, the game is good, make no mistake. but it can, at times, be somewhat painful to play due to all these little nuisances adding up. I imagine a lot of this to be fixed in the remaster, however, so if you decide to go play that version, you'll probably have a much better time. But alas, for those who want to play the vanilla game, just be aware that it is somewhat janky by today's standards. Mass Effect is great, I had an absolute blast with it, and if you're a fan of space and RPGs, then this space RPG is going to be right up your alley. It's got a very immersive universe with strong lore, and if you're a nerd like me, then you're in for a treat with the Titan's wealth of dialogue at your disposal. It should be noted that this game is the first of a trilogy, which I'm told are all great, so if you like this, you have 2 other games to try out. However, there was also a, so I am told, terribly buggy and poorly made spin-off called Andromeda, which, yeah, no thanks. As of the time of recording, there's also a Mass Effect 4 of sorts that's been announced, but frankly I would not have high hopes for it, as Bioware seems to be starved of talent these days. Regardless of their recent failings, however, nothing can change the fact that Mass Effect is fantastic.